Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to LittleAfrica BronxNews. I'd like to thank our viewers for joining us this afternoon. As you know, part of our political coverage for the 2021 municipal elections is our Meet the Candidate interview series, where we meet and interview candidates for mayor, comptroller, public advocate, as well as our local Bronx City Council candidates. And today's special guest is current Brooklyn Borough President, Eric Adams, who is running for mayor. And let me just say, full disclosure, New Yorkers, Bronxites, I know Eric Adams quite well. He is a friend of the African community. I've lost count of how many African-related events I've had at Brooklyn Borough Hall. It is indeed the people's house. So I just want to put that out there so it's out there. But, I want to welcome Mr. Adams to LittleAfrica BronxNews. And Mr. Adams, for our viewers who are not familiar with you, please tell us about yourself.
Thank you. Thank you so much for allowing me to come on. And also, just separate from this conversation, thank you for just being an advocate. You have been an advocate on so many different levels around the quality of life for people. You have been a voice for the voiceless. And I believe what you are doing now in this space and what you have been doing about really reigniting the energy of the African diaspora, a large population throughout the city of New York, in Queens, Brooklyn, Harlem, the Bronx. It's just so important because oftentimes people don't, they live in the shadows of the American experience, and using a medium like this turns that around. And that's my life story, my life journey. I'm born in Brooklyn. I grew up in South Jamaica, Queens as well. I'm the only candidate in the race that is the son of two boroughs. I spent much of my time in Queens, and I had a very unfortunate experience as a young man. My brother and I, we were arrested and beat badly by police officers. And I think my brother is suffering from a mental health illness because of that beating till today. But I chose a different path. A group of civil rights leaders asked me to go into law enforcement and to fight from within. And I did. I went in, I started an organization called the 100 Blacks in Law Enforcement Who Care. And for 22 years, I was a voice of fighting for change. I stood with the Diallo family when Amadou Diallo was shot. I know his mother and his sisters, and I fought for the reform after that terrible shooting where 44 rounds were shot at Amadou. I stood with other victims of police abuse while I was a police officer. And after leaving policing, I went on to become a state senator. I served 4 terms, 3.5 terms to be exact, in the state Senate. And I became the first African-American borough president here in the city of New York. And while I was here, as you alluded to, I built bridges with various immigrant groups in the city in general, but specifically with the continent of Africa. I traveled last year to Gorée Island in Senegal to establish a sister city agreement in the 400-year commemoration of the slave trade. As I stood at the door of no return and feeling our ancestors lying on the ground and on the floor of the ocean, I felt their calling on how we must reignite and reunite ourselves as African people all over the diaspora. And so I think that my goal as mayor, I'm not going to win because I am the best candidate. I'm not going to win because I have a strong vision. I'm not going to win because we raised the $8.6 million that are needed. I'm going to win because those ancestors are going to allow their spirit to rise up As we saw the transition of the first Black mayor, African-American mayor, and David Dinkins, I think this is the ascension as we look at the 400-year commemoration of having a African ancestry become the mayor of the city of New York. And so I look forward to using my experience as a person who has went through some horrific moments in my life and my professional life and my understanding of government. I look to use all of those things to have this city become a fairer city. I have gone through a lot, and we need a mayor that has gone through a lot to help people who are going through a lot. And that is what I bring to this race. And so I look forward to answering your questions.
Thank you, Mr. Adams. So, I mean, right now, the city, we're currently still going through it. The COVID-19 devastation that has wrought havoc throughout the city, affecting families, affecting small businesses. It's been a complete upheaval of everyone's lives. And whether it's socially or with regards to health or with regards to the economy, the impact of this COVID-19 pandemic is going to be felt for a number of years. So the question on everybody's mind, the question that we're all asking is, what is your COVID-19 recovery plan for our city when you are elected mayor? What is your plan for economic recovery, for social recovery, and then also dealing with so many families who are suffering financially because of this pandemic?
Thank you. And that's such an important question. I like to tell people in response to it, my recovery plan is the same plan I had pre-COVID. Many people are talking about how do we cycle out of COVID? How do we find a new norm? And how do we find the normality that we had pre-COVID? And I say there was not a normality for far too many New Yorkers. Prior to COVID-19, 65% of Black children were not meeting proficiency in the Department of Education. Prior to COVID-19, this large number of Black and brown children and families were living in homeless shelters. Almost 100,000 didn't have permanent housing. Prior to COVID-19, we were dealing with a high level of food insecurity in our city. Prior to COVID-19, the unemployment numbers in places like the Bronx and other places were at a high level. Prior to COVID-19, some of the street vendors from the African diaspora were being removed from selling their wares and harassed by police officers. And so as we talk about cycling out of COVID-19, we need to understand that we can't cycle out and create the normality that we had before. We need to create a normality that everyone benefits, because we've cycled out of economic and troubling times before. In the 1970s, we cycled out of the fiscal crises. The rich got richer, the poor got poorer, the middle class got devastated. In 2001, after the terrorist attack, we had a financial crisis, we cycled out, the rich got richer, the poor got poorer, and the middle class got devastated. 2008, the same thing. So as we cycle out of this, we must put in place real procedures to make sure that we all benefits. And how does that look? Number one, we need to change how we are educating families in a real way and make sure we do it in a fair way. That means stop thinking about education being K through 12 and start looking at it as prenatal through career. Every aspect of our disjointed educational system must be connected. We must ensure that we receive quality education from the time of prenatal care. The first classroom is in a mother's womb, all the way through one's start of a career. Then we need to look at our small businesses. Our small businesses employ 51% of the people in this city. Yet our small businesses have to deal with navigating a bureaucratic and often unfriendly a series of city agencies that make it difficult to do business in this city. We can't continue to have citation through taxation, particularly in the outer boroughs. We must become a more user-friendly business entity. One of my plans I have on 100 Step Forward documents, you can go online and take a look at. How do we centralize the entire process of filing to open your small business? And right now, we should waive all renewal fees and startup fees so we can get our small businesses up and operating. Third, we need to have a local business lending network. Hundreds of millions of dollars have come from the federal government. Those dollars did not go on the ground to our small businesses. Too many large businesses who did not need the funds benefit from that. We need to make sure that this next round of stimulus actually comes down to help small businesses with rent, employment, other services that are needed. And finally, we need to rethink our procurement process. $25 billion a year in procurement we spend, only 5% go to minority and women-owned businesses, and much of it goes outside our city and state. We need to refocus those procurement dollars right here in our city. You know, we can have women and minority-owned business sell paper to the Department of Education, cleaning supplies to our correctional facilities, food to our various entities that feed New Yorkers, homeless shelters, and others. We can do a better job of leveraging our procurement dollars to really help bolster and secure our small businesses.
That's quite a plan you have, and I have to say, just speaking about small businesses, there was an article a short time ago in the New York Times where, just speaking for Bronx small businesses, only 2% of Bronx small businesses received any type of stimulus funds or monies from the Paycheck Protection Program. Only 2%. And you know, one of the big problems that business owners said, the obstacles was that the bureaucracy, and they didn't have the support that they needed to complete the paperwork to get access to those monies. And we all know that it's small businesses that drive the economy, and we all know in our communities it's small businesses that employ our community members. So, you know, speaking on that, New York City does have the small business services, the Small Business Administration, Mr. Adams. So do you have any ideas on how you could possibly restructure that so that the Small Business Service Administration is actually there for small businesses when they need it, when they need them, because they weren't there for the last six or so months. That's why we have so few small businesses that received any type of support.
I am a big believer that you want the resources closest to where the action is. I believe we need to do two things to answer your question directly. One, we need to put money into CDFIs, the local banking entities. We need to build out a local banking network because they would have played a vital role if we would have given the resources to them. They would have been able to assist and just filling out the necessary forms and get access to the PPP dollars that were available. Second, under my 100 Step Forward plan, I talk about how do we empower the local Chamber of Commerce, give them the dollars they need to do the backroom work for our small businesses. If you are a cake shop, a restaurant, a barber shop, or any other small business, the amount of time you have to navigate the bureaucracy of government is taken away from your primary role as a small business. You're trying to keep the lights on, customers in the seats, and make sure that you're able to sell your goods and services by allowing and giving a small dollar amount to all of our chambers. They can build out back rooms that can assist many of our small businesses and taking something off their plate that they can focus on the real goods and services that they are trying to provide. And it helps them save money. If they don't have to hire an accountant, they don't have to hire a compliance person, if they don't have to hire all of these additional things, we're putting money back into their pockets and allowing them to have a better profit at the end of their fiscal year.
You also gave an example of, say, the Department of Education working with minority, women-owned businesses to give out some of those contracts to these small businesses. As mayor, would you put something like that as a quota or as a requirement for all RFPs coming from the Department of Education, as well as other city agencies, because the same could be required for other city agencies?
Yes, more than the DOE, we should look at every agency. First thing, day one, when I walk into City Hall, I'm going to walk in with a chief diversity officer. And his goal is to go to every procurement officer in every agency and say, hand in your letter of resignation. We will determine if we're going to accept that letter of resignation based on their output. No more 5% not reaching our target. We're going to then build out a real-time system of how we go about disseminating and allocating procurement contracts. We need to do that in real time. We can't wait each year and look back and say we didn't reach our goals. No, we need to monitor in real time using a dashboard system per agency, bring them in once a month to do an analysis from the procurement offices. Where are your procurement contracts going? We're going to immediately freeze all the contracts and do a review of the contracts to make a determination that are we ensuring a proper dissemination to women and minority-owned businesses to make sure we're getting it right. Far too often, procurement officers are dealing with people who they are comfortable with and who they have long existing relationships. Those days are over. It's going to stop. We're going to move into a real-time system so we can meet the numbers that we're looking for. Monica, I say all the time, if you don't inspect what you expect, it's all suspect. And it has been suspect for far too long when it comes down to accessing the procurement dollars. Why did we ignore all of the local vendors when it was time to make purchases during COVID? Why didn't we buy the PPEs from local entities? Why did we buy food from local entities? We bought 150 meals. We could have gone to the local restaurants, partnered them with the entities that needed the meals, and spent our money locally. But instead, we went to vendors that were of large conglomerates and did not have a true accounting system in place.
Yes, no, that is exactly what did happen. And our local community businesses, many of them suffered, and many of them were shut down because of that.
And they did not have to. You know, we could have gone to some of the local stores. Many would have repurposed themselves. You know, some of our local tailors that make excellent African garbs. If you can make a sophisticated African garb, you sure enough can make a face mask or a hospital gown. There was no intention and being specific at using this crisis to make sure we stabilize our small businesses. That should have been our focus, and it wasn't.
Indeed, indeed. So I want to delve into, since we already started talking about them, the Department of Education. So the Department of Education has a huge budget, over 30 billion with a B, as I always say, a billion. And when it comes to the educational outcomes of our children, supermajority of our students, supermajority of Black and Hispanic, have low proficiency rates, are not proficient in English, writing, and in doing math. Our graduates graduate illiterate and illiterate. We all see the articles coming out every year. Why did the Department of Education allow me to graduate? I can't read. But they have a 30 billion with a $30 billion budget. So my question to you, Mr. Adams, is how are you going to hold the Department of Education more accountable for the educational outcomes of the children? That's question number one. And then my second question is going to delve into the issue with programs such as Gifted and Talented, as well as the specialized high school exam. So we'll first start with those three.
Well, first, no one running for mayor has a more comprehensive overview of education like I do. No one. Because we have education wrong. And, Monica, we have so many things wrong in our city. We are doing things the way we do because we've always done them that way. And it is time for us to say, if we are going to rebuild, let's have an opportunity to rebuild right. If you were to build the building you are in right now, and you did not lay the proper foundation, the beams, correctly, it doesn't matter how fancy the rooms are. It doesn't matter how beautiful the paint is. It doesn't matter what furniture you put inside. The foundation is wrong. And it's only a matter of time before it's going to reveal its structural frailties. That's where we are in education. Think about this for a moment.
Yeah.
I have been meeting with a group of pediatricians and neurologists, and we have delved into education. And they say, Eric, we focus education from K through 12. They said, that's wrong. It's the first 1,000 days of life. And people interpret the first 1,000 days of life as when the baby's out of the mother's womb. That is not true. In the first 4 weeks of life, a baby has 10,000 brain cells. In 24 weeks in the mother's womb, it has 10 billion. Those brain cells that grow becomes the foundation of a child's ability to function, learn, and develop for his entire life. But the strength of those brain cells depends on the nutrition of the mother when she's carrying the child. So if a mother doesn't have the right iron, the right folic acid, the right iodine, that baby can be born with irreversible learning abilities, cognitive issues, and other learning abilities. So when we ignore the foundation of education, which is prenatal, then by the time these children get into the formal part of education in the school building, they're playing catch up. In some cases, they will never catch up. That's why you see such a high level of learning disabilities, cognitive issues, and so many other mental health issues. It starts earlier. So what do I do as the mayor? I say education is no longer K through 12. I say we have a disjointed system, and education now becomes prenatal through career. Every mother and her first child receives a doula. That doula teaches the child brain development, which 80% of the brain develops in the first 1,000 days. Teaches the mother nutrition, what foods you should be eating. Teaches the mother in a real way what this all means, because no one has really given the mother in economically challenging communities what this all means when she's carrying that baby and those first 1,000 days, talking to the child, allowing the brain development. No one has ever really given these examples. So by the time we hand over the children to 3K, we've handed over the children that had the foundation they need to go into 3K. And then 3K reinforces what the child learned in the first 1,000 days. Then we hand them over to K through 12, and we incorporate a system that we've learned from those who are in career and businesses. Because remember, we send children to school so they can either start their own business or be employable. So then we need to have those who are going to be employing people be part of the curriculum that we create so the children are ready to be employed. So as we build out our curriculum, we can't lock out those career and those industries. They should be part of shaping our curriculum. And our teachers need to not live in this bubble of education and not know that there's a real world out there that we're preparing our children for. School can't continue to be within a classroom. We have to stop schooling and start educating, and it must be part of our entire city. Then we need to incorporate real trades from CTE programs, how to be a plumber, how to be a carpenter, how to be an electrician. Even if you go to college, you may have to pay your own way through college. It's good to be gainfully employed with skills that you have. I paid my way through college, 2 classes at a time, but I had skills that I can use in the process. That is what we must do in education. Then we need to look at the structure of the school year. Tell me, Monica, why do we take summers off? That's an agrarian calendar. That was when children needed 2 months off to go on the farm to pick corn. And it blows my mind, why we keep having summers off. That is an agrarian calendar when children took 2 months off in the summer to go work on the farm. So we have to stop doing things that we've always done just because we've always done them. Those 2 months off, science has shown they cause a summer slide, and our children never catch up. So it doesn't mean a child must sit in a classroom, but what we could do is use remote learning to reinforce the skills that children will need in a artificial intelligent computer learning environment: critical thinking, communication, working in groups, financial literacy, 2 hours a day throughout the summer, continuous instruction, that our children won't have that summer slide or that brain drain. Like I had a brain drain that I kept calling you Monica when I should be saying Mona. I just got, I got a brain drain, but so Mona, that's what I'm talking about. Reimagining education, having summer internships, connecting people, exposure. Many of our children are failing every day due to the lack of exposure. They grow up in the same communities. They live in the same housing developments. They in the same blocks. We need to expose our children to the arts, to the museums, to the cultures, to different places, to different entities. That's what reimagining school is. Our children are bored with school. We spend $350,000 for a child from the time they go through kindergarten to 12th grade. And we have to ask ourselves, what have we got for our investment in those children? An overbloated bureaucracy and children leaving school frustrated, angry, and not prepared for their future.
Now that, unfortunately, you are correct. But yes, so Mr. Adams, this situation, this very contentious situation with the specialized high schools and the specialized high school exams. You were a New York State Senator, so you're very familiar, of course, with the Heck-Calendar Act, the backstory with that, and the problems that we're having right now with regards to the specialized high school exams that some people say it's a discriminatory exam because children aren't prepared. But then we also have families who support specialized high schools. My daughter attended a specialized high school. Um, so my question to you, because as mayor and with mayoral control, you have control of the school system. And Mayor Bloomberg, under mayoral control, created additional specialized high schools because the original specialized high schools, as we know, are Stuyvesant, Bronx Science, Brooklyn Tech, and LaGuardia. The additional 5 that we have right now, those were created by Mayor Bloomberg. Lehman High Schools, Staten Island one, the one in Queens. So my question to you is, I know you hear from parents on both sides. How do you plan on addressing the specialized high school debate, as well as the specialized high school exam? Because as mayor, the buck will stop with you under mayoral control.
Thank you for that. First, 3 of the schools we have no control over. As you indicated, the state would determine that if they're going to repeal the Heck calendar decision. 5 of them is under the control of the mayor because Mayor Bloomberg started new schools. And I'm saying this, those are 10% of our students. We are in a place of a triage system. Do we want to use all of our political capital and energy fighting for something dealing with 10% of the students? I'm going to come back to that. I need to move, how do I fix where 90% of my students are? That's where I want to go right now. And so the first thing I would do, just as Mayor Bloomberg started 5 new schools, when you look at the thousands of children who take the exam and don't get into the specialized high schools, I say, hey, let's create 5 more. Let's create more seats and use a different criteria. If we don't want to use a test only, let's not use a test only. Let's use a series of things to make the determination of the 5 new schools we put in place. Let's make sure we get that working, that is successful, and then let's revisit the other 8. But first, let's make sure before we tamper with something, let's get something right. Let's build 5 more, and then let's put our real energy into how do we reform where the bulk of our students are that are not receiving a quality education. Because if we remove the SAT examination, if we remove that altogether, that is not going to fix our problem. You're still going to have 65% of Black and brown children not meeting proficiency. And so that's a symbolic battle. I know it brings a lot of emotion. I know people are angry about that, but we need to put the bulk of our energy into how do we fix a school system that every year fails Black and brown students. And if we're using a triage system, then that triage system says SHAT is not the first thing we need to be fighting for. We need to be fighting for fixing those other schools.
Yeah. No, it's interesting, Mr. Adams, because there's just so much focus on those few schools when we have a school system with hundreds of schools. But again, I guess it's the hot topic. But yeah, we do need to focus on the 90%.
Yes.
Not just the 10%.
And it takes a lot of discipline, Mona, not to focus on the hot topics. We should focus on the right topics. That's discipline. Because if all the noise, you'll get distracted from the mission. The mission is every child in every block in every school should have an opportunity to be educated and be prepared for the future. And we should ask ourselves, the question we should ask ourselves, what is preventing that? and list out the things that's preventing that and move based on the highest level of priority, that we remove the highest number of barriers. And trust me when I tell you, SHSAT is not at the top of the list.
I personally, I agree. So, but I also just want to touch on gifted and talented. The gifted and talented exam that was recently voted down by the panel for educational policy. For some of our viewers who are unaware, it's an exam that children can take at the age of 4 to decide whether or not they're gifted and talented and if they can attend one of the GNT schools. A few years ago, in Brooklyn, District 16 finally got their first GNT program. The parents in Bedford-Stuyvesant advocated for that. For you as mayor, what will be your position on GNT programs? Would you increase GNT programs because right now there aren't enough, or will you simply scrap the GNT program?
You know, it's amazing that we had several districts that did not have GNT programs. We had parents who had to travel far distance, parents who had to go through great hurdles to get to the GNT programs. I believe that we do have children who learn differently and who have certain skills, certain talents, and we should not deny that. Number one, I supported an opt-out for the testing instead of children having to figure out how to take the gifted and talented testing. We should have parents opt out. That's number one. Number two, we should look at a full scope of gifted and talent. We're losing a lot of children who are gifted and talented because we're not using a cross section of ways of how to distinguish these various gifts. You could have someone that English is a second language, and they may have some great gifts and skills that we are overlooking. So whichever way we determine how to reinforce and promote those gifts and talents, we need to make sure we are examining, looking at them and testing and determining every scope of those gifts and talents. And second, going back to what I said earlier, Mona, we're setting our kids up for failure. Because if we're not, as we start to build out this pipeline, of course, if you came from an affluent community that was stable, good nutrition, reinforce your brain development, by the time you get 4 years old, those first 1,000 days of life for you are totally different from the first 1,000 days of the life of the child that lived in public housing, that lived in a tenement building, that lived in some difficult times. We need to equal the playing field. We spend too much time focusing on what children learn and not enough time focusing on how children learn. That is where we need to put our energy because we have it wrong now.
No, I think a lot of parents would, actually, I don't know any parent that would disagree with that. So continuing on, Mr. Adams, I want to touch on housing. Right now, we have an eviction moratorium in place to help families stay in their homes. So many families throughout the city have been impacted financially due to COVID-19. Many people have lost their jobs. And while the governor did the executive order for this moratorium, May is going to be here soon. And the rent arrears continue to pile up for these families. And many of these families, many of these parents still are not working. So as mayor, what is your strategy to prevent homelessness? next year, because families will still be dealing with this. What is your what's your advice right now to the mayor and to the current mayor and to the governor when it comes to helping families with their rent arrears? Question number one. And then we also have a lot of small homeowner landlords who have homes and they rent to one or two tenants, who are also suffering under this COVID-19 pandemic. But people tend to forget that we do have small homeowner landlords that tenants rent from. So my question to you is, as mayor, how would you support and help these families, the renters and the small homeowner landlords? And what's your advice for the mayor and the governor when dealing with this situation now, once this eviction moratorium ends?
You're right, because we're headed to the cliff and the eviction moratorium is going to end. And we must have a plan of the over a million families who are behind in their rents. It's important, and we need to be clear about how we execute that plan. Number one, those who are able to pay their rent must pay their rent. If you are, if you're employed, if your economics, if they have not changed, you can't use COVID as a reason to circumvent paying your rent, because that's taking resources from those who are in need. And there are so many stories out there where individuals did not go through any economic downturn or any economic crisis, and they're using this as a moment. That can't happen. Yes, it's a small number of people, but they're hurting the larger picture. Second, whatever we do for renters, we must do for small property owners. You can't go to the husband and wife or the widower or widower who is holding on, using the renters in their home to pay their mortgage, and say, nope, don't pay any rent. And now you have individuals, these small property owners, who have saved all their money to purchase their home. They still have mortgage payments. They still have utility payments. They still have tax bills to pay. So whatever relief we give to renters, we need to give to these small property owners at the same time. And I am hoping that we use some of the federal stimulus to directly go to give the relief to the renters by looking at those back rents that people who felt on real financial hardships, and give it to the homeowners so that we don't have them lose their home. Because if these homeowners, these small property owners, if they lose their home, you're going to have those large developers come in, take over the properties, and gentrify our communities at a pace that is beyond thinking. And so it's imperative that we use our federal stimulus that's coming into the city to zero in on those property owners, excuse the rent of those who have real hardship and pay those rents, and keep people in their home, because we don't want to overburden the homeless system we have in place, which is already oversaturated. So there's a way to do it. This is something the federal government must do. We must deal with those large number of renters that can show real hardship and make sure that they're able to stay in their homes.
Yes. Speaking, just continuing with housing, can't ignore the elephant in the room, which is NYCHA. And, you know, a lot of candidates, when asked, as mayor, what are you going to do to help NYCHA tenants, NYCHA families? Every year we hear the same stories: no heat, no hot water, lead paint. We had, you know, elevators broken. We had a senior citizen a few weeks ago in the Bronx who died going down the stairs, and she made over 17 calls about a broken elevator. Yesterday, there was another story about a senior NYCHA housing complex, also no heat and no hot water. We know NYCHA gets funding from the federal government, Mr. Adams, but it still is called the New York City Housing Authority. as mayor, what are you going to do? What is your plan for NYCHR to help the families at NYCHR? That's one question. And my second question is, what is your position on the RAD program?
First, I said with helping families, and Mona, everyone you talk to, they're going to tell you about the federal government. The federal government. They've been saying this for so long. Listen, the bugle you hear, that is not the cavalry. That's taps. NYCHR is dying. And so as my mother used to say, boy, you better have a plan B. And if our only plan is the federal government, which we need, the federal government must do its job. But in reality, right now, NYCHR residents are living in deplorable conditions. So I believe that we should, number one, sell the air rights of NYCHR. $8 billion, use those $8 billion to go in and create humane living conditions. Go on the ground, deal with all the basic things that are needed in NYCHR right now. Second, we have to do a better job with the dollars. We must use a CompStat type system to build out a real-time mechanism. You can have a QR code on every NYCHR building that the repair people can go in, know when tenants are home, know what apartments need to be repaired, know where our repair personnel is located, track the tickets to a real centralized system and database to track tickets. How come you could have a package leave Prague or Budapest, land at Kennedy Airport, and on your doorstep and get a ping on your phone telling you when it's there, but you cannot have someone tell you when someone is going to come and fix your cabinets in NYCHR. This is unacceptable. This antiquated system is allowing mismanagement, corruption, and it's also allowing the failure of monitoring our dollars. And then we have to be more innovative. Why do we still have a countless number of scaffolds all over NYCHR, $11 million a year, when we can use drones to inspect rooftops to determine where we need those scaffolds or not? This is a hustle. We're being played. And we need to acknowledge it. And when you move in a real-time, I call it NYCHR stat, if you move in a real-time system that you can monitor in real time, everything from water tower repairs, where the cleaning supplies are going. If you monitor that, what's coming in, what's going out, you're able to use a dashboard system like they use in Boston and what's called City Score. You're able to monitor how you are handling NYCHR. And so that's number one. That's number one that we need to, that needs to be done. Second, dealing with RAD. I don't care what program it is, Mona. The problem with NYCHR is not only are the buildings broken, the spirit of the people, that spirit is also broken. There's no trust. So the first thing is, let's stop being unfair to tenants and telling them, you understand RAD, you understand all of these programs. No, let's allow them to interview an attorney that they trust. City pays for the attorney, but not a city appointed attorney. They interview the attorney and say, this is our attorney, we trust them. Let that attorney go in and navigate these contracts. When I bought my house, as smart as I think I am, my attorney was sitting down at the table with me to go through those documents. That's what we need to do for NYCHR residents as we come up with all of these proposals. Let an attorney who has a fiduciary responsibility to represent them, give them the best advice and instruction so we can remove all the rumors, all the uncertainties, all the things about you're going to be thrown out, you're going to be moved out, well, you should have read the fine print. No, Let's give them a legal counsel that they trust, and then let's decide what program they want to embrace.
You're the first candidate that's made that suggestion, and I think that would go a long way in showing good faith and trying and restoring trust between NYCHD families and the city. Mr. Adams, again, thank you so very much. I just have one last topic that we do need to cover.
Yes.
Bear with me, but it's really, really important. And that is public safety and the NYPD.
Yes.
I'm a mother. I have a 12-year-old Black boy that I am raising. And I look at what's happening here in the city. There's the defund the NYPD movement going on. But for me, as a Black mother, I am more concerned about the high crime, the rampant gun violence going on in New York City. That's my concern for my son. And I know I'm not the only mother that feels that way. And my question to you as a retired NYPD former captain, what can we do, or what will you do for us as our mayor to improve community police relations, as well as address the rampant crime and the surge in gun violence in our communities to keep our children safe?
So, and you're right, Mona. Let me tell you something. Nothing was more chilling to me than watching a young man in the Bronx walk across the street
with his daughter. Yeah.
Right, someone shot. That daughter is traumatized. For the rest of her life, she's traumatized. And when I hear people talk about disband police departments, I tell them, go speak to that mother that lost her 1-year-old child. Go speak to that young girl that watched her dad shot right in front of her. Public safety is the prerequisite to prosperity. You must be safe. And we don't have to have a trade-off. We don't need to say, well, in order to be safe, we have to have injustice. They go together. Far too long, that marriage has been separated. And I say it's time to reunite it. And we could do that. And there's some clear steps we can take as the mayor of the city of New York to build back trust again, because it's about trust. We must make sure that we have the backs of our police officers, but our police officers must have the backs of the people they serve to protect. And that's why I say one of the most powerful positions in the police department and in the city of New York is a precinct commander. He's in charge of a geographical piece of real estate in our city. Our city is divided by precincts, and that precinct commander has a 300-person team to keep us safe. If he has the wrong attitude and the wrong outlook, then the entire team is going to have the wrong attitude and the wrong outlook. That's why I say, let's allow our community leaders, community board, clergy, civic organization, businesses, let's allow a cross-section of community leaders to sit down and put the precinct commanders, the potential commander, through an interview process. Find out his vision. Find out what does he see as public safety. Find out how he's going to deploy his resources and offices. And then use the law 50A that will allow you to look at his background to see, was he abusive as a cop? Then make the determination, is he the right fit for your community? This way, that precinct commander knows he's assigned there, not because the commissioner say, hey, this is one of my buddies. He's assigned there because the community says, we give you the good housekeeping seal of approval. You know what we want in our community, and you're going to police with the proper balance that we're looking for. Second, we need to diversify our police department, not only among ethnicity, but among New Yorkers. Over 30% of our police come from outside our city. That does not make economic sense, and it also does not make sense of understanding the place you're policing. We should allow what I call the peace officers, school safety agents, hospital police, homeless service police, all of those DOT officers, allow them to be promoted into the police department after 2 years of serving as peace officers. And we had the opportunity to watch them for 2 years and see that they have the right mindset to be a police officers. We promote them into the department. Why is that a good thing? Over 80% of them are Black, Brown, and South Asian, and 100% of them live in New York City. So now we have New York City residents that are our police officers. Their children are attending the schools where our children are attending. They are spending money in our community instead of in another municipality in another county. That is how you change the police department's demographics, and in 2-year period is important. A second, we need to utilize our policing dollars. We're wasting too much. I call efficiencies in all of our agencies, and the police department is no different. It's not defunding the police, it's making sure we're reusing the dollars correctly. We have too much money on overtime. Officers don't have to sit in court for 5-6 hours waiting to testify. We could use Zoom and get them right back to patrol. We need to civilianize the units in our police department. We have too many officers that are doing civilian roles. We need to move them into patrol function and allow civilians to do their job. It's far cheaper than having a uniform officer do so. We can save millions of dollars through attrition. We can drop the police population without hurting patrol strength if we get officers back on patrol like they're supposed to be in the first time, and do a better job in the over $400 million in overtime that we're doing. And so it's about being smarter. It's about using our policing in the appropriate way. And it's about rebuilding the trust between police and communities.
Wow, no, thank you. That's very different, and I take it that's in your policy plan document.
Yes, yes it is.
Oh, okay, all right, that's very good to know. So, Mr. Adams, I want to say thank you so very much for joining us today at Little Africa Bronx News, and for engaging our community and letting us know what your plan is for New York City. For our viewers, at the end of this video, there will be a slide with all the information for Mr. Adams, his campaign, his social media handles, as well as the link to his policy documents. And again, Mr. Adams, thank you so very much for joining us today, and we'll be watching your campaign closely.
Yes, thank you. Be well, Mona. Take care.
You too.